All right, so here's what nobody's telling you about Claude Code and Cowork. Now we know they're great. For example, Claude Code just hit over $2.5 billion in annualized revenue, and it got to $1 billion faster than any enterprise software product in history. Now, these are some wild numbers, and every single tech creator out there is making videos about how to use them. But here's the thing, almost nobody is really making the video that actually matters for most people, like you and I and the business professionals out there. That's a business guide, an honest one, the one that says, hey, here's where you should use this, here's who shouldn't, here's what can go wrong, and here's how to deploy it without putting your company at risk. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to walk you through 5 levels of how businesses are actually using this, from personal productivity all the way up to agent orchestration. And I'm going to be honest with you every single step, including the parts that should make you a little bit nervous. So, that being said, let's get into it. So, before we get into the progression, let me set the stage for you because I think a lot of the confusion right now comes from people conflating two different things. So, Claude Code is Anthropic's tool that runs from the command line, meaning your terminal, or through the Claude Code desktop app. Now, you can click code instead of chat, and then suddenly Claude isn't just talking to you, it's actually doing work directly on your computer, reading your files, writing code, and being able to build things. So it went from a chatbot more to a coworker. And then in January 2026, Anthropic launched Cowork, which is essentially that same capability, but designed more so for everyone, not just engineers. So think of it like this, Claude Code is more so for knowledge workers. You describe a task, Claude plans it out, breaks into subtasks, and then is able to execute. It can connect to Google Drive, Gmail, Microsoft 365, DocuSign, etc., etc. And it can work on stuff in the background while you do other things. Dan Shipper, the CEO of Every, put it perfectly. He said that the regular Claude chat is like a hotel room, clean, set up for you, but you start fresh every single time. Whereas Claude Code and Cowork are like having your own apartment with AI living in it. It knows where your stuff is and it can get around the place easily. Now, here's why this matters for you specifically. If you're either running a business, managing a team, or if you're a professional trying to figure out where AI fits into your work, your actual work, not just side products, this is the inflection point. Now, we've moved from AI can answer my questions to, hey, AI can go do this task for me. And that's a fundamentally different conversation. But it's also a conversation that comes with real risks, and I'm not going to skip those. So, what does this actually mean for you? Well, let me walk through 5 levels of how you can use this. And the first level is where most people start, and honestly, where most people are stuck. And that's in personal productivity. Just you using these tools for your own work. And I want to start with something that I think will blow a lot of people's minds, including my own. So, Anthropic ran a hackathon recently, and 3 out of the 5 winners were not developers. One was a cardiologist, one was an attorney, and one was a road systems worker. Now, these are people who had never written a line of code in their lives, and they built functional tools using Claude Code. Now, let me say that again because I think it's important. A cardiologist used Claude Code to build a working application that's not a tech demo. That's the futures of how professionals will work. And this isn't just an Anthropic marketing story. Over at Epic, the healthcare software company, over half of their Claude Code usage is coming from non developer roles. People in operations, people in project management, people in clinical workflows, they're not writing Python scripts. They're saying, hey, I need a tool that does X, and then Claude Code is building it. So, what does this look like practically? Well, let me give you some real examples. So, you could download your credit card transactions as a CSV, which is just a spreadsheet file. You could then drop it into a folder, and then you could tell Claude Code, hey, build me out an expense tracker that categorizes these transactions, flags anything over $500, and gives me a monthly summary. And then in 10 to 20 minutes, you have a working tool. Not just a template, not just a spreadsheet formula, a real working application. One user built out a markdown based system that tracks revenue goals, does daily planning, and gives context aware suggestions. And the wild part here is that when this person had a family emergency, the system recognized the disruption and automatically shifted into what they called maintenance mode, scaling back suggestions and focusing on essentials. Now, that's not something you get from a SaaS subscription. Next one is my personal favorite, and that is analytical dashboards. You could upload your sales CSVs, your churn data, your operational metrics, and then Claude is able to analyze it, spot patterns, generate reports with actual recommendations, not just, hey, your revenue went up 3%. Real analysis that you can then act on. Now, I do want to be honest with you. If you're sitting here thinking, well, that sounds too good to be true, well, you are partially right. There is a learning curve here. It's not as steep as learning to code, but it's not zero either. You need to learn how to describe what you want clearly, and you need to learn how to organize your files so Claude can find them. You also need to learn when to push back on what it gives you. But the barrier to entry here has dropped dramatically. As one guy put it, if you can organize files into folders and create text documents, you can use Claude Code. And I think for the most part, that's mostly true. If you haven't tried it yet, here's what I would do this week. Try to pick something that you think Claude Code can handle or that you yourself don't like handling. Maybe it's something that you hate doing. Maybe this thing that eats up 2 hours every Tuesday. So then from there, document what you currently do. Then open up Claude Desktop, click code, and then describe what you want and see what happens. You might be surprised. Now, let me show you where it gets really interesting past the personal level. The next level is task automation, which I know most people are excited about. Now, this is where you go from Claude, help me with the thing, to Claude handles this category of work for me. And this is where the business use cases start to feel and look serious. So the example I have here is what Newfront did. Now, Newfront is an insurance company, not exactly a Silicon Valley startup, and they deployed Claude to handle their HR support, contract review, and knowledge management. And the results were that they claimed more than 1 month per year of admin time back. And they saw a 60% reduction in document processing costs. 1 month per year. I just want you guys to think about that for a second. Because if you had an admin team of around 5 people, that's like getting a sixth person for free. Except it's not free. There is a subscription cost, but the ROI math is not subtle here. And then there's Zapier. They went all in. 800 internal Claude driven agents across engineering, marketing, customer success, not 800 people using Claude, 800 separate automated agents, each doing a specific job, and their task completion grew 10x year over year. Now, I want to pause here and talk to the business owners in the audience because I know some of you are thinking, okay, well, Newfront is an insurance company with an engineering team, and Zapier is literally a tech company. So, what about me? Well, that's a fair question. So, let me bring it closer to home. Consulting firms are using Claude Code to build custom MCP servers. Now, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it basically means Claude can plug into your existing tools like your CRM, your ERP, your Google Drive, or your Slack. Now, one agency reported processing 54 PDF invoices simultaneously using subagents. That's Claude spinning up mini versions of itself, each one handling a different invoice all at the same time. And if you're running a small business and you're spending 10 hours a week on invoicing, contract prep, and data entry, that's exactly where task automation lives. It's not about replacing people, it's about eliminating that work that people shouldn't have to be doing in the first place. Now, the nuance here is very important because task automation only works if you actually understand the task. If you can't describe your current process clearly, exactly like what happens, in what order, what the exceptions are, then Claude's not going to do a great job at automating it. Now, the automation step requires you to slow down and think about how your business actually works. And honestly, for a lot of businesses, that exercise alone is valuable even before AI touches anything. So, what does this mean for you if you're managing a team? Well, start documenting your workflows. I'm serious. Write down the steps, identify the repetitive parts, and because that is going to be your automation roadmap. And then that brings us into the next level, which is team integration, which is where things start to get both exciting and a little bit complicated. So, when it comes to team integration, this is where AI stops being one person's tool and becomes part of how your team works together. And this is where I need to start talking about the stuff that most creators are going to skip, and that's security. Because the reality here is that the moment you go from I'm using Claude personally to my team is using Claude with access to company data, the stakes are changing completely. Back in November of 2025, a Chinese state actor tracked as G2G 1002 weaponized Claude Code for cyber espionage. They hit more than 30 organizations, and this was a real problem. Another company called Checkpoint discovered three critical vulnerabilities in Claude Code. Two of them had severity scores of 8.7 out of 10, and these could be exploited just by cloning an untrusted project, meaning somebody could create a malicious code repository, and if you cloned it and then ran Claude Code on it, they could potentially take over your system, steal your API keys, and get your credentials. Now, I'm not telling you this to scare you away from using the tools. I'm telling you this because if you're going to deploy this across the team, You need to know what you're dealing with. So we have four main risks here, with the first being that agent level system has access to a ton of different things. Claude Code runs in your terminal with the same permissions that you have. It can read files, execute commands, access production systems through MCP tools. And if you give it to every single employee without guardrails, you have zero visibility into what it's accessing. Next one is prompt injection. Malicious instructions hidden in documents or code can override Claude's behavior, and there have been documented cases of AI coding tools deleting directories and database tables because of injected prompts. Next big one is data leakage. Now, this one is sneaky. Claude's outputs can reveal personal data, secrets, and internal project details. And this one should keep you up at night because there's now a court ruling that says discussing attorney client privilege information with an AI tool constitutes a waiver of that privilege. So keep that in mind. Let me say that again. If your legal team is using AI to review privileged documents without proper safeguards, you could be waiving your privilege. That's not a hypothetical risk. That's literally case law. So, how do you do team integration safely? Well, here's what the smart companies are doing. First is in managed settings. So, Anthropic's enterprise plan lets you push a managed settings.json file to every single user. Now, this sets organizational wide policies, what Claude can and can't do, which MCP servers are allowed, and which commands are blocked. Second is MCP allow listing. Instead of just letting Claude connect to whatever tools it wants, you can whitelist specific connectors. Google Drive? Yes. Random third party API? No. Third, we have deploying through Bedrocks or Vertex. Now, AWS Bedrock and Google Vertex AI give you network control so your data stays in your cloud environment and doesn't traverse the public internet. Fourth, we have zero data retention mode. On Enterprise Plan, you can enable ZDR, which means Anthropic doesn't retain any of your data, period. And fifth, and this is the one I think is underrated, Claude.md files. These are files that you put into your code repositories that tell Claude your company standards, your coding conventions, your security policies, and think of it like an onboarding document, but for AI. So every time Claude starts working in that repo, it reads those files first. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you're thinking about rolling this out to your team, the deployment order does matter. So don't start with everybody gets access. You should be starting with, hey, we define the policies, we set the guardrails, we picked a pilot team, and then we can expand from there. So that's team integration. Now, AI can become a team tool, but only if you put in the governance work first. Now we're going to move into enterprise deployment. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, Hank, I only run a 20-person company. This doesn't really apply to me. But actually, a lot of these principles scale down. So stick with me. At this level, you're not just using AI tools, you're looking to build an AI infrastructure. And the decisions you make here will determine whether AI is a strategic advantage or a liability. So these are the four deployment models that companies are using for the most part. First one we have here is centralized. Now, this is usually where you have one instance and it's managed primarily by IT or DevOps. Now, it's clean, it's controlled, but it can be slow to serve different teams' needs. Next is department based. This is where each team gets their own instance of Claude. So this is configured primarily for their specific work. For example, marketing would have their setup, engineering has theirs, HR has their own. And the idea here is it's more flexible, but harder to maintain consistency. Next, we have hybrid, which is primarily a shared core with team specific extensions. Now, this is what most larger companies are gravitating towards, but it might not make the most sense for you and your company. Then lastly, we have CL/CD integration. This is where it's deeply woven into the development workflow. Now, about 90% of organizations now use AI for development, and 86% are deploying agents for production code. So things are moving quickly. So let's zoom into authentication real quick, just because this can trip some people up. So the right way to do this is direct OIDC federation with your identity provider, Okta, Azure AD, Auth0. This gives you SSO, temporary credentials with full user context, and the ability to monitor who's doing what. With subscription-based plans, usage is basically a black box, just to let you know. There's no per developer token dashboard. Really, the only way to see actual usage is to parse log files in each developer's local directory, which is, not ideal if you're trying to manage costs at scale. Now, I do want to come back to the human side of this because at this level, the conversation shifts from how do we use the tools to how is work changing. Now, here's something Boris Cherny at Anthropic said that stuck with me. So he said that he went from spending 5% of his day generating code through Claude Code to 100%. And the crazy thing is that he's not alone. Across Anthropic internally, Claude Code writes 70 to 90% of all the code that they are currently producing. That means it's basically working on itself. And engineers are starting to describe their role differently. One engineer said, and I'm quoting them here, 70% plus of my work shifted to being a code reviewer and reviser rather than a net new code writer. Now, they're not writing code, they're managing AI that writes code. They're reviewing it, shaping it, and primarily directing it. Now, the crazy thing is, this is happening right now. This isn't some 5 years away that people keep saying. This is right now. 57% of organizations are already deploying agents for multi stage workflows. 16% are running cross functional processes across multiple teams. And if you're a professional watching this, here's a number that should get your attention. PwC found that workers with AI skills command wage premiums up to 56% higher than their peers. Now, that's not a small edge, it's a career defining gap, and it's only going to widen. So, whether you're running the company or working at one, the message at this level is the same. This isn't optional anymore. The question isn't should we deploy AI? The question is how fast can we deploy it safely? All right, so now we've reached the final level, and I'll be honest here, this is the one that's both the most exciting and the most uncertain. Now, Josh Bersin, who's one of the most respected researchers in HR and workforce strategy, published research showing that AI transformation follows typical 4 stages. Stage 1 is assistance. This is where AI helps you do your existing work, and around 15 to 30% improvement. Now, that's where most people are currently. You're using Claude or ChatGPT primarily to draft emails, summarize documents, answer miscellaneous questions, that sort of thing. Then we move into stage 2, which is automation. This is where AI is handling entire tasks and part of your workflows. Now, this is around 30 to 50% improvement. And that's the task automation level that we talked about. For example, the Newfront example, the expense tracker and the invoice processing. That's where things are getting automated for us. Then we have stage 3, which is the multi-function agents. Now, this is where it gets pretty crazy, where AI agents are working across multiple functions, coordinating with each other, and handling complex multi-step workflows. Now, this is 100 to 200% improvement. And that Zapier example with around 800 agents, that's stage 3. And then we have last the stage 4, which is autonomy. This is where you're getting 300% or more improvement, and the AI agents are able to operate with high level goals and minimum human supervision. Now, we're not fully there yet for the most part, but the leading companies in 2026 are touching it and getting closer to that opportunity. The concept Burson introduces is the superworker, an individual who isn't just using AI as a tool, but operating as an orchestrator of what he calls unlimited resources. So you're not doing just one job faster, you're directing AI agents across multiple work streams, reviewing their output, making judgment calls, and focusing your human energy on the things that actually require human judgment. And I think this connects to something that I've been trying to say for a while now, is that the companies that figure this out first don't just get a head start, they get the whole race. Because while everyone else is debating headcount, the companies that embrace this model are going to be moving at a speed that makes the debate irrelevant. But I do have to give you the counter argument because I promised you honesty. Now, there are real challenges. For example, integration with existing systems. Around 46% of companies cite this as a major blocker. Data access and quality, 42%. Change management, 39%. And that last one might be the biggest one because you can buy the tools, you can set up the infrastructure, but if your people don't know how to work this way, or if they're scared of it, or if your culture punishes experimentation, the technology doesn't matter. And there's also genuine career uncertainty. Engineers are feeling it right now. Knowledge workers are feeling it. And the conflict between AI makes my work better and AI makes my work unnecessary is a scary feeling, and it's not helpful to pretend that it isn't. So, based on everything that I've seen, we know that AI is transforming work far more than it's eliminating it. And the people who build AI skills now are positioning themselves for a future where those skills are not optional because they're going to become the baseline. And the way forward isn't to either panic or ignore it, It's to lean in where you can, but lean in with your eyes open. Now, the superworker model isn't just about replacing humans, it's about giving humans capabilities that we've never had before. A consultant who can deliver the output of a team, a small business owner who can build tools that used to require a dev shop, a professional who can take on projects that were previously out of reach. Now, that's the superworker era. It's where the future is heading, and whether you're just getting started or already deploying across the team, the direction is the same. If you're a business owner or entrepreneur, one biggest tip here is that you got to be trying Cowork this week if you can. Download Claude Desktop, open it up, and give it a real task from your business. You can test it, give it something that's real, and see how it performs with your actual data. Two, do a workflow audit. Pick your top 5 time consuming processes, write down the steps, star the ones that are potentially Claude focused that Claude could help you with, and those are your automation candidates. Third, set up a policy before you give anyone else access, even if it's just a simple one pager. Hey, here's what we share with AI. Here's what we don't. Here's how we review AI outputs before it goes to clients. Just little things like that that can really save your butt down the line. And if you're a team lead or manager, first thing, pilot with one team first. Pick the team that's most open to experimentation, set up guardrails, and then measure those results for at least 30 days before you look to implement any more. Two, investigate enterprise plans. Huge thing here. If you're handling any sort of sensitive data, maybe it's client data, financial data, HR data, you need managed settings, MCP allow listing, and ideally Bedrock or Vertex deployment. And third, biggest thing, you got to start training now. Don't wait for some sort of company wide initiative. Run some workshops, share some examples, and start to build out a shared library of prompts and workflows that'll actually work for your team. And lastly, if you're an individual contributor or professional, build your AI portfolio. So start with Claude Code or Cowork, learn how to describe tasks clearly, practice that loop of describe, review, and refine, and recognize that this is the new literacy. Two is to remember the 56% wage premium. Now, AI skills aren't just nice to have, they're becoming a career differentiator on the level of learning to use spreadsheets in the 90s. And three, which I cannot recommend this enough, is don't just consume. Create things, build something, even if it's small, personal dashboard or workflow tool, something that solves a real problem for you. That's how you're going to learn what these tools can do for you. You don't have to jump to the end overnight. Start with where you are, move up one level, get comfortable, then move again. The companies and people who win in this era aren't the ones who are moving the fastest. They're the ones who are moving deliberately. They had a plan, not just a subscription. Now, look, I made this video because I was frustrated. I kept seeing content about Claude Code that was either, hey, this is amazing, here's a demo, or hey, this is terrifying, AI is coming for your job. And neither of those is particularly useful if you're sitting in an office trying to figure out what to actually do on Monday morning. Now, the truth is somewhere in the middle where, these tools are genuinely powerful. They're genuinely being adopted at a scale we've never seen in enterprise software, and they come with genuine risks that you need to take seriously. And all of these things are true at the same time. So if this helped at all, please do me a favor and hit subscribe. I'm pulling out these type of deep dives every single week, breaking down what actually is happening in AI in a way that makes sense for your work and your business, not just the hype version. Drop a comment below about how you are using Claude and let me know where it's making sense in your workflows. And I'll see you in the next one.